Good morning from Los Angeles, California, and welcome to Los Angeles Greek Film Festival online panel discussion, Cinematography in the World. My name is Despina Patrona, and I am part of the Los Angeles Greek Film Festival team. I would like to thank all of our panelists and participants, the International Cinematographers Guild, IATSE, Local 600, the Interim National Executive Director, Alexander Tonneson, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator, Karina Rosana Tautu, and the Greek Society of Cinematographers, President Yorgos Frenzos. Just a couple of guidelines. The panel will run approximately 60 to 75 minutes. The first half of the panel will be devoted to a discussion among our panelists, while the second half will open to questions from the audience. If you'd like to ask a question, please type your name, title, current location, and we will make sure to open all the questions also to the audience. For Q&A and function at the bottom bar at the webinar screen. We are thrilled to have with us today Alexander Tonneson, the Interim National Executive Director of the International Cinematographers Guild, IATSE, and Local 600, a 20-year-old veteran of labor movement and an extremely knowledgeable individual in labor matters. Nina Ham is a Canadian-Mexican cinematographer who specializes in dramatic interviews and cares about creating and working in an equitable and collaborative environment. Ted Hayash has filmed features and documentaries all over the world, including Greece, Albania, Brazil, and China, among others, and recently has turned his work in service of nonprofit organizations and good causes. Christos Karamanis is a member of the GSC and is known for cinematic gems such as Argyris Papamitropoulos, Santian, and Athina Tsangaris Chevalier. Yorgos Karvelas is an award-winning Greek director of photography whose recent film Digger was a Greek Oscar entry in 2021. Sevdegia, did I pronounce that correct? Castrati. Is from
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is from Kosovo, and her work spans several areas in East and West Europe and the United States, and is motivated by giving a voice to fictional and real-life characters who might not otherwise be heard. Ki Jin Kim, a Korean filmmaker, is based in Los Angeles, and his films also tell stories of the diaspora and recount immigrant experiences. Jean has also had experience making Araceli Lemos' Holy Emmy in Greece. Anastas Michos, member of the ASC and GSC, is a versatile director of photography who has collaborated with directors like Milos Forman, Edward Norton, Danny DeVito, Mike Newell, and more. Fedon Papamichael is an award-winning member of the ASC and the GSC and has been nominated for an Oscar multiple times. His accomplishments include titles such as Sideways, Ford versus Ferrari, Nebraska, The Trial of Chicago 7. Fedon has also directed films in Greece, the latest being Nightfalls. Karina Rosana Tautu currently serves as a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator for the International Cinematographer Guild, IATSE, Local 600. She is an award-winning film director born behind the Iron Curtain in Romania. And last but not least, Stephen Bernstein, our moderator, a member of the ASC, DGA, and WGA, filmed the Oscar-winning Monster, among many others, has had a 40-year experience and is now a director, currently finishing his third film. Stephen knows the Greek film industry quite well, and he has assisted the Greek state in establishing the new film law and tax incentives. Stephen, take it away, please.
Hi, everybody. What a prestigious and interesting
panel, and a big one. This is a big panel. This is a very big panel. So I'm going to do my best to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak and say things that from their particular and unique perspectives. But if I should overlook you, please jump into my general and specific questions. I want to start very directly with what may seem an odd question, but something that I very clearly recollect, and it's about fear. I remember first coming back to America from England and coming to Los Angeles and affecting confidence as I was a cinematographer, and was sure that I could fake it until I make it. But I was terrified of Los Angeles. For those of you who've worked both abroad and in Los Angeles or in America generally, talk a bit about what it would be like for a young Greek cinematographer coming to America for the first time. Is it a place to be terrified of, or is it a place that's going to be conducive to creative expression? Anyone can start.
I guess I can talk about that coming from Kosovo. That's a very small country and a new country in the world. And the industry just kind of is in the early ages and developing. But a great, of course, coming from a small place to US, it's very scary. But I came to study. I came to study at the American Film Institute. And I think that was something that really helped me create and be in a place that was also comfortable and create a network of people that I work with all this time. And it was a very good way to make me feel comfortable and welcome in this place, because it is really big. And like in Kosovo, I know everyone. And here it just took a lot more time to get to know people, and there's a lot more people that I don't know yet. So it's just a very, very different kind of place, but you just have to be open with it and work very hard. And I think this is also a very welcoming place, because there's also a lot of people that are willing to share their experiences and help and be mentors and be really like a lot of people that will just guide you through the way. So it is a scary place, but it's also a place that is very accepting and welcoming.
Anybody else?
Well, I'm also from Korea as a sort of international student here to study film more. And I'm not formally trained at all as a cinematographer. So like actually being on the set for the first time was scary, but I think it's the project that settles you down in a lot of ways. Like I was lost in different lingos, different terminology, and then all of that. But when you get down to the actual work, it's exactly the same thing wherever you are. So that actually sort of quickly settled me in the scene. And I think it's important to focus on project and people on your set. I think you should be.
That's a really interesting point. I think that we forget that everyone around us wants us to succeed. We think they don't. It seems very, very competitive and sometimes ruthless, and people are ostensibly very friendly. But ultimately, once we start a project, we're all in it together, so we all want it to succeed. And I think generally organizations like 600, our union, the ASC, and others are there to facilitate and help people when they arrive. Anyone else want to talk about fear, Ted?
Well, I'm not from, I am from the foreign country of New York. Right. And so coming here to Los Angeles at the time that I came was really, it was difficult to network. And I think if I came here now, there's so many more opportunities to network, and so many more ways to show off your work and to connect with people. And I think that there's a tremendous advantage now that people have that I know that I didn't have. And it seems like there's a lot more production, there's a lot more styles of production. And so to speak from my experience, perhaps if I was afraid, yes, probably kept me in other roles besides cinematography for longer. But I think that if I were to show up now in the same at 23 years old or however old I was, I would I would hope that I would feel that there's a lot more opportunity and a lot more ways in.
I think you're right. What's interesting is what 600 is doing to help with education, with people integration, with the representation or the access for underrepresented voices. Does someone from 600 want to talk to us about those opportunities?
You know, I want to jump in real quick because this ties into both the fear of coming to Los Angeles from a different country, but also about 600 trying to educate, you know, people entering the industry. And I, on a regular basis, have conversations with directors of photography and others. You know, it's not just directors of photography that we represent, and they're coming from a different country. And there's definitely an intimidation that happens about coming to Los Angeles and also dealing with Local 600 as a guild and a union. And one of the things that we're trying to do as an organization is make sure that everyone understands that even if you're not a member and you're coming here and you want to be a part of the industry, you should reach out to us, and we're happy to have a conversation with a non-member, someone who's new, to help you educate yourself and to make an informed decision on how to best approach entering the industry here and how to start working with the union, doing union jobs, because that represents a certain, you know, segment of the work being done here. And so we want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable saying, hey, let's just call Local 600, have a conversation, so you're making an informed decision on how to move forward with your career.
It's a great insight. And I should point out that 600 has training programs as well. I think the idea of phoning them up is very important. As I moved into directing and producing, whenever we had a problem, the initial inclination is, well, let's not engage these organizations. They're going to punish us. They don't punish you. When you ring them up and say, we have a problem with manning levels, we have a problem with what tier we're at, we're going to be paying people, they'll answer those questions. The ASC, of which many of us are a member, has training programs that are available online and actually at the ASC Clubhouse, which people can get involved in. And several of the panelists have mentioned the idea of networking. And I don't mean this in a cynical way that you only meet people so that they can advance your career. But as artists, it's great to meet other cinematographers and talk about techniques and methodologies. For example, an issue that comes up with many cinematographers from Europe and from the US is whether we use camera operators. Now, in the US, we pretty much always use camera operators. In the UK, we very often use camera operators. There are cinematographers who like to operate themselves and then have a camera operator standing by. I'm interested creatively for the cinematographers to talk about whether you use operators and why you think it's important or not important. And I also interested in the union view on that. Faden, maybe something you want to jump in on? Don't want to ambush you, but I'd be interested in your view because you've done some great films, as many of you have. I think you have to unmute, Faden, sorry. Get the sound department in.
Hi.
There you
Sorry. Well, yeah, the operator thing is an interesting thing because I also come from Europe, but it's so long ago, so I can't really share my experiences because it was quite different back then. But it was the initial projects I always operated, so it was very natural to me. And I also like my influences back then, like Robbie Miller and stuff, who actually interviewed to be an assistant with, and you know, they were always coming, the European DPs, they were always operating. So, and then starting at Roger Corman, and we always operated ourselves, of course. So transitioning into and getting into the union, thinking, I don't know, what, 95 or something, Diane Keaton's movie, Unstrung Heroes, I was first, you know, joined the union on that. So did the rest of my crew pretty much. We all kind of got in on that. You know, dealing with having, you know, to have operator, which at the time Wally Pfister was my operator, and remained in such position for 10 years. But, you know, I'd collaborated with him before. But it was very hard for me to let go of that. And then even today, I mean, on films that are definitely single camera and more intimate dramas, like let's say Nebraska, you know, I think we didn't have an operator besides myself, which, I mean, is possible, right? Like it's possible at this point, I think. I'm asking Alexander. No, because because at some point it wasn't like you had to have an operator, right? And then, I mean, I don't know.
With union productions, generally in the United States, it's required to have an operator for every camera. Now, productions can ask for a waiver from the union, depending on special circumstances.
Right.
And there is a possibility that a waiver could be granted. Now, that's relatively rare, but sometimes we do that depending on the circumstances.
Right.
And
right.
so it's, again, this is important about having that communication and doing it early on. And we always encourage productions and our directors of photography to reach out to us to have that conversation, because it's much better to try to arrange it ahead of time than to then try to set something up and then find out the last second that what you were planning is not possible under the contract. So
Right,
again,
right.
communication both ways is so important.
Yeah, but to answer the question, I mean, yes, I mean, of course, since I usually now have to at least, A and B sort of camera crew, and we completely staff them. And I also, once there are multiple cameras going, I prefer not to be on a camera, because I think as the cinematographer, I want to be next to the director. I want to be hearing what he says. I don't want to be in the corner, like on the camera on a hi-hat and not really knowing what's going on, so it's, I always make sure that we do have a fully staffed, second or C camera, B camera crew. And that's been sort of the standard for me on recent projects. And but like now I'm about to do a smaller movie in New York, and we had already hired like B camera, and then now they're saying, we're reviewing the budget, and they go, I mean, we'll have like, but they're trying to, for example, convince me of operating B camera and stuff. So this is something that still comes up a lot. And
it's a wonderful conversation we're all having all around the world repeatedly and such like.
Right.
So it's a very interesting philosophic dynamic about our creative process, about big crews versus small crews. Because the inclination, I think, when you start out, coming from smaller countries, very often is use smaller crews. You feel more comfortable, it's less intimidating, fewer people to speak to, fewer people to stand over you criticizing your work. I think only later do you discover, particularly when you arrive in Los Angeles, that sometimes it's a great advantage to a big crew, because they can be a specialization. And when someone specializes on a single activity, they're probably going to do that activity, pretty well. And this idea of big crews versus small crews is something I want to revisit shortly. But first, to some of our Greek friends, talk to me, please, about what organizations are in Greece. Talk to about unions, cinematography organizations, and what access young aspiring cinematographers might have there, but also to Americans coming to Greece to work, who they would speak to. Who wants to respond to that?
Well, I mean, I can say, because I just did a movie in Greece, a very small movie. And, we have strong crews, that we're building a crew base that's growing. There's a much influx of foreign productions. And so in the past, really, it's a bit sad, but I'll just say it. I mean, it's the most qualified crew members, speaking about camera assistants and gaffers, they mostly make a living working in commercials. Of course, they do want to do features, and they try, and they will, of course, play in both arenas. But now that we do a lot of production service, because we have the rebate that's still in place, although it's changing constantly. But they have gotten a lot of exposure. Yanni Roseos, for example, is an excellent first AC. I mean, he was working on my movie, which was like a very small movie, like under $400,000 production. But then he also came and worked on Indiana Jones in Sicily, and they're getting exposure, and they're really getting much more familiar with the way bigger movies and bigger crews work. And, on that one, he was D camera somewhere, and, it's just really understood, this big structure of, multiple camera crews and on different assignments, and it's great, and it's going to continue to grow.
Yeah, I
That's
think
the get from this.
Yeah, the more work there is, the more experience everyone gets. And feature experience is very specific in some ways. And the more features that come to Greece, the more experience they'll have in feature films, and the better they'll be at it. So
Yeah, and
crew
the mixing in with, other foreign key crew
Exactly.
members. And then in terms of union and stuff, I mean, Christos and stuff, you guys probably know. I mean, we don't really have a union, but they are, especially camera and the film workers, they sort of have gotten together and made up some basic rules, like workday hours. They keep adjusting them, and then turnaround protections and stuff. So they have kind of established that. And since it's not a huge community, so they can all kind of get together every once in a while and refine these. It's kind of like their self-made union, but maybe somebody who works more often in Greece can elaborate on that. But we don't really have a union, like an official union, and I always tell them what our rules are, and that you guys should try and fight for, some of these basic things, which are, especially turnarounds and getting paid
So,
for travel and all that.
So some of the Greek cinematographers or Greek producing people here, can you tell us a bit about what production's like in Greece from your perspective, and how you perceive it?
Say it again, please.
Could you tell us a bit about production in Greece from your perspective? How big the films typically are, crew levels? Are you having, is it hard to find an A-list crew there to do a feature film? And where do you find them, when do you find them?
It's a variety of things. It's a variety of productions that we're dealing with. We're starting with the small ones, but we usually work with the guys that we are going together most of the time. So we have our partners, let's say. Now at that time, it's very important for the crew that what's happening in Greece, that there's a lot of productions, foreign productions. Exactly what Ferdinand says, that really helps, for more experience. But still we're struggling a little bit about all of this.
Struggling in how much work there is, or struggling and you don't have a large enough crew base to service the films?
We don't have a lot for the second one.
Don't have enough crew.
Yeah.
So I know, because when I was there, I set up some training programs. Are there lots of new training programs being set up in Greece to introduce crews to production methods?
It's happening. It's happening now. There are a lot of trainees coming in the job, so that's good. Because, at that time in Greece, there were something like 3 foreign productions, big ones. So at that moment, me trying to find some crew, it was almost impossible.
So what would you do? Would you bring people from other members of the EU, or they were coming from America?
I didn't have this, I didn't go to the end to brought somebody from abroad. So I figured out. But I believe that maybe this will come.
Yes. What a lot of people don't realize in America, considering, look, I'm a great advocate of bringing productions to Greece. So my wife, Carol, and I were there for 2 years facilitating that. And we've had some success, and we're glad to see American productions going there. What a lot of American producers don't realize, which all of you probably realize, is that Greece is very much part of the EU, which England no longer is, an act of madness. So they can draw crews from other parts of Europe. It's not great for Greece because you want to train local people, but as Faden rightly said, the more productions there are there, whoever's working on them, the more access local workers have, and the more training they can get, and the better they'll get at it. And that's the way a crew base has been built. That's what happened in the early days of Vancouver. I think a lot of us worked there. When you first went to Vancouver, you couldn't find anyone, and you guys probably remember sometimes your electricians came from a local building site, and although they were understood how to solder wires together, they weren't real film technicians. And now Vancouver is one of the biggest production bases in the world, and I envision that for, I think, Greece as well. Let me go back to this.
We definitely have to, because in the past, like a Mamma Mia, like I was talking to Carlos, the key grip, and they were very upset. I mean, because I think they I think 3 or 4 technicians, Greek technicians, were involved in that production. So that has definitely changed since then. I mean, because they brought everyone from England, and back then. And, are very few, like we have, the top sort of technicians that we had in the country were not even being hired on that. So, but that has changed. And I know like in Spetses and on Glass Onion and on Lost Daughter, we had a lot of, Greek crew in camera working also. They used to, people are starting to invest. There was always a problem. Like I would say, well, you need this to be competitive. You need the, otherwise people are going to go to Belgrade and Romania and Bulgaria. And it's just like, because, I live and work in Georgia, the country of Georgia, which is even smaller than Greece and stuff. But the difference is there, people were investing in equipment and they were buying, they're buying Alexa LF minis, they're buying anamorphic lenses, they're buying S360s, they're buying lights. And in Greece, every time I say, like I could never get an OLED monitor on set, and a DIT and all that. And I go, it's really not, you guys can't really compete like that. And they go, well, the market doesn't warrant for us to spend spend money on things.
Right.
They were just scared because they go, right now I have a truck, I'm talking to my gaffer, he's got a bunch of old lights. I go, you got to upgrade this, you got to start buying some LED panels. And he goes, well, right now I get like a producer with, barely, they'll pay me like, $1,000 a week for my truck and what's in it. And if I upgrade it and spend $200K, I'll still get $1,000 a week because that's like the deal we've always had, so this mentality has to slowly, people have to gain confidence that things will work, and then they'll be more competitive with Croatia and other sort of options that are in the region.
I think what you just said is really interesting. And I think it's that line, if you build it, they will come. And I think you're absolutely right that sometimes you have to invest even before you see the reward directly in front of you. This also goes to the idea of crewing levels. When you work with a small crew, besides the problem I cited before, is that when you have one person doing 3 jobs, they're probably doing 2 of them inadequately, in my view. It seems an economy, but ultimately it's a false economy because films happen so quickly, one catastrophe can affect everything that follows. But the other thing is to do with training. We're having this issue right now with the WGA. We're on strike in America, and one of the issues that we're striking about is crewing levels in writers' rooms and studios. And what we're trying to point out is that, yes, not every young writer in a writer's room is writing full episodes every single day, but they're watching other writers doing that and they're learning their craft. And if we don't give people access to others who have mastered the craft, then they can't master it themselves. It's almost medieval to have any other view that through some sort of osmosis, you walk into a writer's room on a $30 million series and you start writing episodes right away. It doesn't happen. It's a false economy. So the same thing with crews. When you work on a bigger film, you've got more experience. You get to see professionals like people on the panel here working, and you can learn from them. Same thing with equipment. If you go and you buy equipment, this is Vancouver's a great example. Georgia in America is another great example. New Mexico is another example. People went out and made the investment. They built studios, sound stages. They bought cranes and Technic cranes. And initially, they weren't renting and they weren't getting paid for. But then when the industry saw the equipment was there, they came and they were paying full whack. And now New Mexico film industry is booming. The industry in Georgia is, and elsewhere in America and around the world. Let's talk a little bit about unions and safety.
I just want to say one more thing about crews and in Greece also, just because it's, now that they're getting exposure to bigger crews and fully staffed crews, and like you said, like back then everyone was kind of, doing multiple things. I mean, they see the structure and they see, I think it's very important. One thing I always complain about in Greece about the crew is like let's say everyone who's in camera, like a camera assistant, operators, we don't really have anyway that just function as operator. And we have like a couple, some Steadicam operators. Everyone wants to be a DP. And I always say, my crew in America, I have a Bob Hall, let's say, a camera assistant, he's the career camera assistant for like 45 years or, 50 years. you know, that doesn't really exist in Europe. You know, and I think it's partially because, you know, they're not you know, there's not enough structure, not enough to show them that, you know, it can be very fulfilling. I mean, here there's many camera people who don't want to be an operator. They want to be a first, you know, a lot of operators who don't want to be a DP. I mean, Scott Sakamoto, I've done multiple movies. He doesn't want to be a DP. You know, he certainly could. And you know, they just want to be the best at what they do. And they have pride in being the best focus puller in the world, you know, and the best Steadicam operator in the world. And that is something that lacks, you know, the confidence, like, you know, you're always going to feel like you're not treated like, you know, as a equal filmmaker, participant of the project. If you're like the first AC, you know, it's not really respected, but also the spirit of, you know, because we don't have a union and people don't have a chance to grow and come up through the ranks of, you know, organized and reliable employment and shoot, and that also will enable them to make a living, you know, while they're in these positions. You know, no one's going to want to stay in those positions. You know, everyone is trying to move.
It's another great point. It's really interesting.
It's a really big problem because, you know, as soon as you have a good operator, I mean, a good camera assistant, you know, the next year I go back and I'm always told, oh, he's shooting now. You know, it's like they're all, you know, they stay in that as little as possible, you know.
Yeah.
That's the problem, like structuring and building a film industry. Yeah, so.
It's a changed tradition. And I think, particularly in Europe, I think rightfully, there's a great tradition of film as art. Very often people are coming out of art backgrounds or film schools, which have an inclination more towards an examination of it as an art than as something commerce-based. And they want to become artists as quickly as possible. And they make a differentiation between a technician and an artist. Really, cinematographer is kind of a combination of the two, but there's a great nobility in camera operating and camera assisting and being a great grip, etc. And that is a tradition that you'll observe in America if you haven't worked here before, where these vast crews will have grips who've been grips for 40 years. In England, certainly, Lou Lavalier was my camera operator who had worked with, David Lean, years before, just bringing great traditions, had no interest in it being anything but a camera operator, and was seeing the same sort of wheels he used in 1963. So that's a beautiful tradition, and it gives people a particular applicable ability in a specialized field, which means they'll never let you down and can bring things to your creative part that you would never imagine someone could bring, which takes pressure off you.
Yeah, it's just not realistic then in a country like Greece, or let's say the rest of Europe, even Germany and stuff, where you can rely and make a consistent living as an operator. It's just not going to happen, you know. So they are forced. Those people that have those ambitions are forced, and they move to UK or to US, you know. Basically, that's the only place you can really make a living.
Great observation, yeah. Mr. Miklos, I think you had something to say. Sorry.
Let's not forget that we're a very small country. And the cinema demands a lot. So it's a little bit contra all of this. And I'm saying again that I agree with Fedon. The problem is with camera people, that mostly of them are going to be director of photography. But for the other crews who have people that they stay there and they are really good and they are many years on the job. So at that time that we have a lot of foreigner productions, people are coming in. But still, let's not forget that we're a small country, and even a lot of people who have work now with the foreign productions. I have an issue about what's going on with the Greek cinema. How can Greek cinema stand next to this, wave, all of this job that's coming? Because all the people are focusing on that now, and it's true, because they're investing, they're buying things, they're giving but they don't turn easily their head to the Greek production. The Greek, I feel that this will be a small in the beginning, but maybe a big one as it goes on.
I hear you, and it was a big issue when we were setting up the the tax credit there and the training program about how we would structure it, because people worried that it was kind of a cultural imperialism, particularly as I was American by birth, and that we were going to be subverting part of Greek culture. And it's a very important debate that we had repeatedly. I would say this, I think your concerns are well-founded. I would say this, however, is that I would use the example of England, of all places. Everyone thinks that England has been a production center forever, but when I was working there in the 80s and 90s, it was going through a recession in terms of the film industry. There was no work. The year I left England, there was one feature film produced there, one. All the studios were empty, Pinewood, Shepperton, Elstree, etc. And then, of course, the Americans saw an advantage, the dollar exchange rate, or whatever producers think about in that regard. They saw the advantage and they came shooting in. And the word on the street was, again, cultural imperialism. We're all going to become a satellite of the Americans. It's going to be all action films. And it was for a while. And then what happened was new studios began to be built. So many new crews were trained. There was such an investment in infrastructure that suddenly there was an availability of resources that wasn't there before. Thousands of highly trained crews, vast sound stages, and local investors who were enticed or seduced by the allure of the film industry. And now it's one of the most successful and biggest film industries in the world.
That will never, we can't compete in Greece. We can never.
It'll never be exactly like that in Greece.
Well, no, I mean, you know, the main advantage that England, for example, has, and I've worked there several times now in the studios, is that they also have access to actors that are English-speaking actors, and they can use them as local. They don't have to travel movie stars. They have their own group of famous actors there, which is why that's, you know, will never happen in Greece. You know, we just don't have that base.
I think that's absolutely right. Still, my hope is that American productions coming there don't overwhelm it, but provide training, finances, and resources so that the local indigenous filmmakers will have those resources to draw on themselves. Yeah, it's a delicate balance, but it's still my hope.
And then what Christos is saying, that, you know, even if this happens, who's going to suffer is the smaller independent Greek filmmakers who now can't get any crew at all, because the few good crew that we have is really just seeking out to recoup their investment on their cameras and their gear and their lights. The local gaffers that are great. We do have career gaffers that are pretty good. I mean, but it's a handful. And they are going to be either in commercials, as they have been in the past, but that was not so much a problem because a commercial only lasts 3 days. But now, let's say our best crew and our best gaffers and our best camera assistants are on foreign productions, and no young Greek filmmaker and producer, as I have many friends who are really struggling now to get anybody because they're all busy working on Glass Onion or something, you know. So it's really, like Christos is saying, that's a very big concern for us. I know you're saying yes, and there'll be another generation to come out, and yes, we do have to go to that next generation, let the more experienced people work on those movies, and hopefully, but you know, eventually they're all going to just be looking for that, and then the Greek productions just can't really pay that much, you know.
Yeah, and it's a huge
can't compete. So you're always going to be fighting to get the crew, because
it's a huge concern. It's a huge concern, but still, I think
it's happening.
It's already happening.
Yeah, it's a huge concern. Still, better money coming into Greece than not coming into Greece, and then we've got to strike a balance. And I think it's a matter of legislation. I think that more emphasis has to be put on the Greek tax credit to support Greek independent productions. I think it has to be tilted in that direction. Completely agree with what you guys are saying, but I also think it's great that money's coming into Greece because it helps the Greek economy, it helps ordinary Greek people in related industries, and it provides training as well. But I think you're absolutely right. We have to defend the essential nature of Greek cinema, and not let just become a satellite of the US. Mr. Mikos, I think you had something to say. I keep cutting you off. I apologize.
Yeah, there. I'm unmuted now. Yes, Fedma.
Yes.
So,
are you on the boat?
He is.
Where should I be? I'm a Greek, man. Of course I'm on a boat in the summer. A whole bunch of interesting points were made. I actually worked my very first Greek film in '92. And I just wanted to bring the couple of things that are salient to what everybody's saying. In order to have a industry from the ground up, Vancouver is one example. Atlanta, Georgia is another one. Cape Town, South Africa is a third. All of those came through a structured private and government program. None of it came organically. It wasn't like we started shooting there and Atlanta somehow had a bunch of crews. They literally, the state of Georgia, literally invested in education. So that thing about somehow or other, the influx of foreign films is going to create an organic kind of consequence that more filmmakers will be generated, I believe won't happen. Just as the influx of women on camera crews organically did not happen. It was not until there were actual programs put in place, both by the state and by the industry, which then encouraged this to go. So that's the one point of that whole thing. Greece, I totally understand the European concept as particularly Greek, because there's a couple issues. One of them is the alphabet itself. Everywhere else in Europe, oddly enough, uses a certain kind of alphabet, and they're Anglo-speaking, and it is way easier to go to Italy and figure out Italian than it is to go to Greece. The successful countries like South Africa, and to back up what Phaeton says, particularly Cape Town, it is not just technicians. It is the fact that when you go to Cape Town, you can literally hire 100 English-speaking extras, that culturally and everything else. So all of those things that we hope possibly in a program that happen organically, they cannot unless an industry is working symbiotically with the state, which then decides that we want to do this. Stephen, when you speak about Vancouver, that was 20 years in the making. When we speak about Atlanta, that was 20 years in the making. I remember when Phaedon called me from Atlanta in the 90s looking for crew, like literally going, is there anybody here that knows how to gap anything, right? I mean, you're right. We had the term, I don't know what you were shooting there, but it was you in Atlanta and I was somewhere else. The same thing as in Cape Town. Cape Town was a post-apartheid clear mandate of how we're going to make this work. So, so
I mean, sorry, on that note, Atlanta, it's not like they developed local crew. You know, people just moved there once.
They moved there, absolutely. Because
I mean,
the
like
work
I was
there.
shooting in Detroit. I was the last one on Ides of March, the last one that when Michigan had the program, and then the new government there came in, and he said, I don't see the value in this, you know, because it's hard, you know, for a politician. You can't really show him the outreaching effect of having, you know, because it's hard. Sometimes we hire like mathematicians to show to politicians, you know, really how it can, you know, it's not just anyway, but he shut it down, and all my Detroit crew moved to Atlanta, you know. So
same thing happened.
Most of my LA crew has also moved to Atlanta now, including my gaffer, basically, and then they buy places there, and that's it. So that's why we don't have like a lot of people.
I want to. This is super important stuff, and it goes to this symbiosis between government and producers, and a lot of other very important issues. You know, not everyone understands the way our industry works, and it's a part of our education. I was about to move on, but Karen, Karina, yes.
Yes, I would like to make a comment. I'm actually in Tulsa right now, and I had meetings with the Oklahoma, Tulsa, and the Cherokee Nation film commissions. And I would say there's optimism here. Call me an optimist, but the Cherokee Nation is a great example to look. It's not 20 years. I mean, they started a long time ago, but they had this combination of will, organizing, pride. It's a very like heavy, like you can feel their pride of like doing a Cherokee. They have a TV station, they have a sound stage, and their language is actually very complicated. If you look at them, their alphabet is not, Latin alphabet. But, and of course they do speak English, and you can create a little bit more value in terms of extras, but they do have a great model that's working, and they reached out to us. That's why I'm here. And they're creating right now internship programs, training programs to benefit their own nation within, the big United States. And I would highly recommend, I don't want to take too much time, but to look at this, because it's actually working when you are willing to organize, when the state is willing to step in, and the people on the ground say, hey, we have some models, we have solutions, and definitely Alex can talk more about how to organize. But I can tell you that this is a very interesting model, and it's doable. I don't lose hope. And I'm Romanian, I know exactly that mentality of like, everybody has to be a DP and an artist, but there is pride in working as, and I wish I knew, I was a second AD and first AD for years, and it was a great asset, but here, like my classmates, they all think that they need to be DPs and directors, but you can make a living with us, for example, as part of a union, as a digital utilities. You have DPs working on that level and doing your, making your project on the side. So it needs to change, that mentality needs to change a little bit.
Yeah, I remember lecturing at the National Film School years ago in the UK. And the first day of the class, the incoming class, I asked how many wanted to be directors of 371 students. 371 put their hands up as directors. So it is a problem. But you raise a very important issue again, which is I think something we all share, whatever our individual perspectives. Film is good for a community. It creates income. It allows for creative impetus. It allows local artists to express it. It's then the management of that industry when it arrives, and I hate to call it industry, to make sure it most benefits the local population. And Christoph makes a very good point, taking back it up. I think everybody was saying the same thing. I think Anastasis was saying the same thing, was that if we don't manage it carefully, it takes a long time, and we can find that we're going down the wrong road. But ultimately, one thing that even we as cinematographers, as leaders of our productions very often, have to emphasize to people is the benefit that films provide for local communities and local economies. To wit, I do want to go on to another, I think, super important issue. I'm emotionally engaged in all this because the strike that I'm engaged with right now, but unions are very important, not just because they're trying to get us higher wages, but because they're protecting working conditions. So there's two issues I want to talk about: how important working conditions are to the creative process of cinematographers, and specifically how 600 protects us as workers, and for people who haven't worked in the States, what they can anticipate in terms of work practices. We've had a couple of tragedies in America, one in Georgia with a train, act of absolute irresponsibility by a local producer or a producer there, and then a gun accident in New Mexico, again, a tragedy. We need to be protected in the workplace, and that's something essential for us, because one thing Tate and I were talking about is the idea of workers. There's a nobility to being a worker, and you're entitled to certain ordinary human protections in the workplace. And when producers refuse to provide it out of decency, then the unions now are empowered to provide that. So Alexander or Karina, if either one of you want to address that question.
Well, I'll just jump in, just because obviously safety is kind of one of the primary tenets of a labor union in terms of protecting our members and the other people on set. Obviously, this industry has had a history of problems. The nature of the work means that your workplace is going to at many times be unsafe or much more risky than most people going to an office building or even a factory, because of the nature of the work always changing from location to location, how the workday changes, what you're doing, etc. So, and obviously then you bring in things like firearms and explosives and working in helicopters and underwater and all these things, and you create an environment that the potential for accidents is just greater than in most workplaces. So safety is a huge area of importance for Local 600, for the IATSC, and for all the other entertainment unions. Here in California, we've taken a tact of trying to, bargain into our contract safety language, but then also work legislatively to try to add safety language to the state laws and have that hopefully spread across the country. So after the tragedy that happened on Rust, with our member Helena Hutchins tragically dying on set, there was a real movement to try to address safety, and not just firearm safety, but safety in general. And now we have SB 735, which looks like it's going to pass here in California, which is going to allow for a safety supervisor to be assigned to every production that is funded by the California Film Incentive. It's going to be a pilot program starting in 2025. And this model, we've seen its success in the UK and in Australia and New Zealand. Working together, as unions and having the solidarity within the community and pushing both, to negotiate contracts with this language, but also legislatively, can really result in changes. Now, what we've seen with the DGA deal is they have safety language in there that builds upon that success. And now it looks like there's going to be a requirement that productions in Atlanta and New York, some of them are going to be required to have the safety supervisor following the California model. And so all of the unions working together with the legislative bodies are able to make this progress. And you see how it's a combination of the DJ negotiating a contract and the legislative work coming together to really make change that's going to affect the entire industry. And this is where, solidarity amongst all the workers and the unions is so important, and understanding that, every worker in the industry, whether it's a director, a writer, a director of photography, or a grip, they all have the same interest in mind to work together on these safety issues. So, and obviously safety is an important issue in terms of members getting support. So we have a safety app that members can download that has relevant safety information. They can call the safety hotline, which is operating 24 hours a day if there's a safety issue that's urgent. They can make online hazard reports. And so this helps track what the safety issues are. And so repeatedly, we're trying to engage members, educate them on how to, reach out to the local to get the information they need, and also how to prepare them and how to deal with the safety issue on set. Because a lot of times there's not going to be a union rep next to you. But if you have the knowledge about how to address that, and if someone says, hey, pick up the camera and get in the car and free drive, you and all the other crew can say at the same time, that's not the right way to do this. That's not safe. We all understand that. Let's think about a different solution about how to do that and approach that to make sure we get the work done, but we get the work done safely.
Let's also talk a bit about inclusion. When I was first starting out, every cinematographer was an old white guy, to just be very honest. And that has begun to change. But what initiatives has the union undertaken, or any other initiatives people can cite in the industry to help underrepresented voices? Karina or Nina or anyone else want to address these questions?
I was like, Alex, do you want to answer that? Because you've been in it longer. I'm a consequence of your intentions.
Well, I think that Local 600, there's been an ongoing effort to try to change the pipeline in terms of training new people coming into the industry and giving opportunities where there have been none. And this has been an ongoing effort. Karina's right in terms of, us hiring a DEI coordinator, diversity, equity, inclusion coordinator, is a really sign of the times in terms of what we're trying to do and the leadership that our national executive board and our officers have shown on this issue. And then focusing on partnering with organizations like Manifest Works and Hollywood CPR. Karina's out with the Cherokee Nation and others, trying to, make sure that language is part of the film incentive here in California. Doing things that we can, to really try to make sure that the opportunity is given to everyone coming into the industry. And that doesn't mean that we sweep aside all of our current members, but it means that we're trying to change, how things fundamentally work so that when people come onto set, they're prepared to work and to have a real career. And historically, if you look 10, 20 years ago, in terms of how the studios handled this, they would say, oh, let's hire a diversity hire, drop them into production, they'd work that production, and then that individual would not work in the industry again, right? And so we as an organization are taking a tactic that we want to make sure that someone starts out from the ground level, gets the experience they need to be able to actually be successful, build that network, get the experience so they can work their way up. And thinking about directors of photography coming from Greece to the US, that's one of those barriers that's challenging. And Karina mentioned this, that there's some people who join us, they want to be a director of photography, but coming to the US to start as a DP is an incredibly high bar to set for yourself. So coming in and joining and trying to work your way up, a lot of our members really advocate for doing that and say the experience of working your way up through the department, from a digital utility to a loader, to an assistant, to an operator, to a DP, it not only gives you the experience of how to work and see how things are done well, but also you build that network so you can have your career. So you can work on the side, work on your independent projects to continue your DP work, but then you can work your way up. And we're creating those pipelines to make sure that it's not just a certain segment of the population that's getting that opportunity now. Now we're really trying to make sure that others get that opportunity to join the local and work their way up too.
Nina, can you tell us a bit about your experience starting out in the industry and working up and how you found it?
Yeah, so I would say probably as like the person here who's earliest within their career, I started out coming to LA not really knowing many people. I had worked on one feature in Wisconsin as a second AC, and then I actually second AC on a feature film for Ted, who invited me here. And I ended up not really actually going through camera department, but through grip and electrical work a little bit more through AFI thesis films, AFI cycle films. That was really helpful for me learning basically, one of the best film schools in the country, like not having to pay the tuition, but seeing everybody who's working. And then those DPs also hired me on the projects once they graduated, and I could continue to see them working and learning from them. And I would say, like, even going back to the first question about fear, I do find that, like, when you are starting out and you're hardworking and you are working your way up and you show ambition and you show like you are really, really open to like learning everything, and you don't come in saying like, I'm going to be a DP, I'm going to be a director, but like, eventually that's what I would like, but I'm just grateful to like learn whatever. People really want to help you here. And I think people are always trying to connect you or bring you on or put you in touch with other people. And so I, did several years of grip and electrical work until it essentially broke my body, like it breaks everyone's. And then I started, transitioning into shooting. And my journey has been into a lot of like documentary based, like interview format type of things. But like, I'm really glad that I started in grip and electrical, and I did a little bit of ACing when I started, because it was, I think really, really helpful. And I can see the difference when I work sometimes if I work for other DPs and I see that like they've never worked in any other department, like it can be hard for them to say what they want or, essentially like transmit their vision if they don't know a little bit about how everything is working. But that's kind of been my journey, is a little bit of everything, and then starting to shoot.
Again, this goes back to a theme that we've come to many times in this discussion about being exposed to people who are more experienced. That's why I advocate for larger crews. That's why I like this cross-border integration between different industries, recognizing the cultural concerns, but at the same time, it's great to draw on older people who've done a lot of movies who can share that experience via the union, via the ASC, via the Greek Cinematography Association, or just working with people who've worked on lots of movies. They're treasure troves. And I think in my experience, they tend to be very generous in giving that information. It's not something that's sacrosanct that we don't want to share. If we figure out how to light things in a particular way, or how to work with actors, or how to block something, I, in particular, it's my compulsion to try to share it with other people. Jin, when you have worked here in Los Angeles, Has your experience been people very generous and supportive and helpful of you?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think that's why I emphasized on the work itself. If you focus on the work, I think that is something else. You don't have to like actively try to network. People will be interested in connecting you to with other people. Like, then there'll be another set that you can do that. It's just sort of like expands and evolves. I think that's kind of how, at least for me, how I overcame maybe a bit of fear that I had in the beginning.
Yeah, me too. It was by accident. Ted and I worked on a film very early, terribly small, with a very eccentric, rather delightful director. We worked ridiculous hours. It was complete chaos. And even when we thought it was finished, the director didn't think it was finished. I think he locked us in at one point to make sure we had finished the shot. I just saw him the other day. But from that little film, the first thing I did literally when I got off the plane or the boat, I built 8 or 10 relationships, led to my Noah Baumbach films, led to Monster and everything else, and met Ted. So the idea of getting out and working on whatever the project is, providing the conditions are inclusive and safe, I think facilitates everybody. And I think you'll find the people leading those productions are very generous, which is why I love to see more Greeks coming here and more Americans going over to Greece. I've got a shameful thing to admit in that I cannot pronounce the first name of our guest from Kosovo, but can you tell us a bit about your experience in Los Angeles when you came there?
Yeah, I mean, coming from Kosovo, I am the first female cinematographer there. So when I came here, I kind of knew that it's not that different, but actually I was surprised to find that it actually wasn't that different. And even these days, a lot of times I work on sets. I have a lot of people say that this is the first time that they're on set with a female cinematographer, which is, something that I have a lot of, luckily there is a lot more women working in this industry, but still it is something that it's not where it should be. But I find also in terms of crews and hiring here in Los Angeles, yes, I can have more women be in my crew, work in my crew. But when I work, because I work in LA and I also in US in general and also in Kosovo, but my crew in Kosovo is mostly guys. There's no woman working there at all. And I do actually hire Steadicam operators from Greece as well. I've had them work for me, because of the region. We usually hire from Macedonia and Bulgaria, Greek, all these places. So, but it's always guys. I'm never able to find somebody that's like, it's a woman, because I actually do look out for women and other people, because I think that we need to give opportunities to other people, because we as cinematographers are in the place of decision making. We make decisions who we have in our crew, and I think it is up to us to make the step. And as other people have given possibilities and opportunities to me, I should be the one to create for other people as well. So I try to do that as much, but it does take consistent work and focus to be involved in that, because it doesn't just happen by itself. We have to make it happen.
Yeah. What's the situation in Greece? Are there a lot of women cinematographers, members of minorities and things? What's it like there? Peyton?
I think there are 2, 3. Pardon, you can say.
I think, yeah, Olympia, I mean, and
Christine as well.
Yeah, but it's a small percentage, relatively small.
And there is a young one also is coming up.
But I'm sure.
August, do you feel there's a prejudice against them? Is that why there's so few, or why do you feel there's only 3 women cinematographers in Greece?
I just think because in the past, I mean, it just wasn't, it just hasn't developed as a path for, I mean, we do have a lot of women directors, like a lot.
Yeah.
Which is great, and a lot of very strong women producers. So they have really taken control of the new generation of independent filmmakers, documentarians. They have international success, Greek directors won like just last year in Cannes for a short film, best woman director in San Sebastian. So I mean, yeah, it's just, you know, the camera and like I'm sure it's the same as in Kosovo and Belgrade and wherever I go. I mean, in terms of crew, I mean, like Grip Electric will never find a female on those. I mean, in the Balkans, like especially, you know, it's just something that hasn't really been able to develop. But yeah, and I don't know. I still think like I don't know how many women really would want to work in Grip Electric and cameras, you know.
They're not used to.
No, I'm saying about
yeah, it's I think there's women that once they see more and more women would want to work because they just don't think that it is really something that is a job for them. But also another thing that I find, you know, I'm a member of Local 600, a cinematographer, and working here is very different from working in Kosovo. And as here, we do have to also, yes, we have the unions and everything, but we have also as cinematographers to be in charge of like making sure that safety is really respected, especially the hours of work and overtime. We already work long days, you know, but going back to Kosovo, where there actually is no rules, is no union, I find myself just advocating a lot more and getting myself a lot more like sometimes it is really like getting in trouble with productions because of the time of work and how much the crew is really respected, you know, and that is also, I think, why it is difficult for some of the crew to just keep the positions because they can't fight by themselves. You know,
that's a great point, and that's exactly why there are unions, to empower ordinary workers, because without a union, very often you're a voice in the wilderness. And we've all worked on independent films where there's no one there protecting us. I'm going to ask Karina a question just before I do. Any quick questions from the audience, shoot them towards us. We've been talking a lot, I know. And then I also want to talk about how things are organized in Greece, how productions are put together, and that sort of thing. But Karina, you had a point. Please carry on.
Yes, I want to add the fact that, you know, my job as a diversity, equity, and inclusion, I always say it's not about checking boxes. It's not even about like targeting certain things. It's about curiosity and awareness. The fact that we know, you know, that we have a problem, and I can tell, you know, like, forgive me, I'm partially Greek. I'm going to assume my Greek side. When I entered the Romanian film school, you know, like this is how I pitched myself for Local 600 when I applied for the job. I was told you can apply to any department but no cinematography. That's during my lifetime. It's a reality. It was like that blunt. I have a friend who wanted to switch from screenwriting, a classmate, to cinematography. They said no. Well, she finished cinematography, screenwriting program, and then she was admitted in FEMIS in Paris. And now she's a successful DP, and now she's teaching at FEMIS, actually. I went to a panel like the other week at the American Association of Cinematographers. There were people from Czech Republic, from all over the world. The FAMU in Czech Republic, they only have men, and they didn't even flinch. It was kind of like such an, you know, one angle. There was a completely monolithical. And when everybody else was talking about, you know, and they were aware of the situation. Again, going back to what Alex pointed out, and we were talking, it's about, and actually, I think Anastas mentioned, right? It's about intention. And again, I would add curiosity. Be curious about other people who are not like you. And if we can instill that, and also respect. And I think after the Me Too movement, unfortunately, we had to have that. And the time's up. We're a little bit more aware that the set conditions are, you know, not really safe, especially for women. And I have plenty of stories from Eastern Europe, like when I started as a translator, second AD, first AD. I mean, you know, we have our share, and we kind of take that for granted, and we say it's normal, but it's not. And now we know.
No, that is a great point. And things we considered normal, I think all of us who've been cinematographers for a while, what I would consider normal on a set, as right thinking as I generally am 30 years ago, I'm absolutely shocked when I experience it now. what anyone feels politically, the awareness that now is shared throughout our community has been essential to improving working conditions for all. Let's talk about organizing in Greece, for those of you who've shot there. Some questions we've had from the audience or from others about how they get jobs on Greek films. When a film's being put together, when a cinematographer is putting a crew together in Greece, where do you go to? Who do you reach out to? How are productions put together there? And how do you find crew or maybe new crew?
Well, I mean,
I tell you, we are a very small country, so everybody knows each other. I mean, you don't search for people, you know people, and you say, I want this particular and particular, and if they cannot come, so you go to the next one that you feel comfortable also. So you know everybody knows everybody. I'm not gonna take any interview from somebody that I don't know here in Greece.
So if they come from commercials, you wouldn't be prejudiced against them if they want to work on a feature with you. You give them the opportunity.
They all come from commercials. They all come from commercial. I mean, what you do is typically you the production company. I mean, let's say the line producer of a UPM. I mean, he'll have the people that they rely on, and that's how they maintain their crew by keeping them employed all the time. So you kind of go. Otherwise, once you start losing people, then it's hard to get them back. So these companies keep their A crew busy, and then when you contact your line producer, then
you have those people, right?
You expect that he brings those people, which is like Christos just said, it's not a huge show. It's like it's not the number one guy, and okay, so Yannis is not available. I'm going to Christos, and I'm going to and then what's he doing? Oh, he's also on some shooting Spetses on some foreign production, and then
Yorgos, you want to jump in there? Yorgos, are you with us?
Yeah. My experience is like I have 2-3 camera assistants that I communicate. They are friends of mine, so the 2 are males and 1 is female. And it depends from the time. If they are busy, I jump into the next person that I know. But yeah, for sure, we are a small country, and we know, let's say, 95% of the people that are available. Yeah, but for sure, there is another thing that the last 2-3 years, a lot of new guys are coming in the industry because of the needs of the cash rebate thing and the big productions. So yeah, I feel like the next years will be much more availability by guys. For sure, I'm stuck with these guys for, I don't know, something like 10 years.
It's also a rule that there must be a part of the crew, the new crew that's coming, and to be women. It's a rule. So that's good.
I'm probably preaching to the converted, but I mean, we should spread the word that Greece has the greatest concentration of microclimates in the world. The weather is great. It's a spectacular, beautiful country. It's an historic country. It's a highly educated population there. People don't realize there's a great film tradition there. They have studios, 2 new studios are being built there. Their film training program. So my xenophobia cuts in all directions. I'm loyal to 3 different countries, but for those of people who haven't shot in Greece, it's a great place to shoot with great crews. There's no question. We identified this 5 years ago when we were setting up the program. There's a problem with crew shortages. It's kind of a good problem to have initially because it means there's a demand. But as Christos rightly points out, we do have to concentrate on making sure that local indigenous production is protected. So the Greek film remains with a Greek identity and doesn't become, Pinewood South. So I think that's all really great issues. Are there some questions from the audience that we can move on to? Please pass them along to us, and I will be happy to take them. Let me also talk for a second, going back to this idea of big crews versus small crews. I was praising big crews in some respects. Is there anyone amongst us who feels that they prefer working with a smaller crew and they want to discuss that? Or does anyone want to talk about European production methods that they feel are superior to American or British production methods? Anybody?
Yeah, I'll quickly say something because I'll have to also jump off. I was so when I give a class in Greece, and I just did in Georgia, and these countries where I always feel like, you know, people are discouraged. You know, their goal is to try and get out of Greece or these countries that don't provide these opportunities in their mind. And, you know, everyone is like, how do I go to America? How do I get in the union? Like, that's, you know, I go, you know, let's also talk from a creative standpoint. I always try and tell them, you know, there's something very liberating about working in the smaller frame. It's not like this ball and chain on your leg. You know, I have to move, you know, hundreds of people and fight myself through this, you know, very sort of restricting. Like, I can be very reactive to beautiful things, you know, like I would just, this movie I had one gaffer and one other electrician that was helping. I had one grip. I didn't even have dolly or couldn't have laid track, and it was, you know, for me it's very refreshing. Okay, but I also really want to emphasize and reassure them that, you know, stay at home and don't just look to leave and work on bigger productions. You can tell great stories with, you know, lesser means and smaller crews, and be very responsive and reactive to that kind of working style. You know, that goes against, you know, all the things we're trying to achieve with unions and train more people. But, you know, I just don't want them to be discouraged. You can make great movies and tell great stories with, you know, smaller budgets, and, you know, of course.
Yeah, the main thing is to make movies, and even if it's small, it's just great that you're working. And if you're working at all, it's going to improve your skill set, because you're going to fail half the time, and the best education is to fail at something. And certainly sometimes, I love your expression, ball and chain. There's nothing worse than when suddenly you decide you want to change a shot, and there's 300 people who have to move 600 lights, 85 miles of cable, the truck, the makeup. And my favorite thing is the video village with 150 chairs behind it, and they're right where you want to put the camera next. So it's something to be said that slows down and subverts the creative process. Ted, something you'd be expert on, because you and I worked on big studio films together, and we worked on some very small films together as well. Which do you prefer?
Well, I think it's very interesting that when you get to larger and larger productions, there are expectations that are presented from production, from management, that have nothing to do with the creative process. They have everything to do with, are we going to make our day? Are we going to finish before we need to send the minor actors home, the child actors home, because they have a limited amount of time on set. And so these things have nothing to do with they have nothing to do with the creative process. They have everything to do with getting the day done. And so sometimes these smaller productions where you can say, oh, the sun didn't come out today, it's not sunny now, so so let's wait till the afternoon and really change the order of the day. Or you have a lot more flexibility in terms of when you have a much smaller production, a much smaller crew. And so I think that there's really something to be said, especially it speaks to what Faden was saying, is that when you have a limited amount of money, you have the proportion to creative impulses and flexibility to budget are often don't align. So sometimes it's a lot better to have fewer resources and greater flexibility.
Right. Mr. Mikos, I think I actually cut you off before I realized, but do you have views on big crews versus small crews and creative flexibility?
There, unmuted. Like most, I think it's a question that is antithetical to filmmaking, because there's totally two separate ideas and totally two separate kinds of things. So to say that one has a preference, one versus another, is a really hard question to answer, because they both have positive attributes to them and they both have negative attributes to them. So yes, is it more freeing? It sure is. But do you really want to do your 12 pages a day? And would you not like to do 2 pages a day? You know why? Because the creative process allows you to think in a certain way, which is slower and more deliberate on a 82-day schedule, because you have 82 days worth of prep, versus I've done films like Faden I just finished. Literally, I just done one with a gaffer, a best boy, a key grip, a best boy. I'm on a camera. We managed to convert a shopping cart for a dolly. So we're one up on Faden because we had a shopping cart. Yes, that also has its attractive qualities. So, you know, I think the part of it is like many things, Greece, having grown up there much of my life, when in my younger life, people look outside of their own country, particularly small countries, to look to be a world influence. Am I influencing my community? Am I influencing a larger world? And if you look at Greek musicians, Greek painters, Greek playwrights, or any other kind of thing besides our artistry, you'll say that when Yannis, the musician, reached out to a worldwide audience, which required an X kind of concert, which then required an X kind of tour, and I can keep on going, versus filmmaking, which is the same thing. So to discourage the idea at times that I need to leave to become a rock and roll star, and I need to go to London, Denmark, Berlin, New York, LA, does not necessarily negate the idea that maybe you should stay home and do your own bouzouki music. You know, I mean, it really is, it speaks to the heart, it speaks to the art, and it speaks to who you want to tell stories to. So, you know, I get your question, but it's a complex answer versus, you know, is bigger better than small? No.
It's a great answer, and it addresses everything. I think it's really smart what you said, and it's both. I've done both things myself. It's kind of fun when you've got a light something big, and very often that's one of the things that engages the audience viscerally, is how big something is. It's one of the things that cinema on a big screen can provide. But then, you know, an anecdote both on Monster, where we were behind, we were struggling on a tight schedule. We put the cameras on our shoulders. We put the lights at the end of painters' poles, and they were paper lanterns. And we did 57 setups in a day. And I have to say, as I look back on it, the best performances that were gotten, some of the best drama, some of the most effective filmmaking when we were under the most pressure and had the fewest resources. So I think there's a balance, but you learn from both. And this theme that I keep coming back to, cross-culturally, we all learn from each other. We learn from bigger crews by having access to people with greater experience, but we also learn from working on smaller crews. We learn from working with people from different cultures and different backgrounds. The mention of curiosity. When you work with people from different backgrounds, they stimulate you creatively. And as artists, that's something we should be encouraging with each other, is to build a bigger church with larger pews, to include more people and make greater art.
I would point to Faden's storied career, because if you look at Sideways, you look at Ferrari, you look at Indiana Jones, I mean, you look at, they're two different entities, totally two different entities. And is one less than the other? I mean, I was jaw dropped on all three of them. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly right. I think we're running low on time. There's just so many more things that I want to talk about. So many interesting people on this panel. When I was a cinematographer for 30 years, so fellow cinematographers, and you get us in a room and we can chat for at great length. But what I really wanted to encourage was the link between these two great nations, to facilitate that link, to talk about the differences and the way that they're the same. to recognize the obstacles that have to be overcome, both for people thinking of coming to America, but Americans thinking of going to production in Greece, the protection of the Greek culture when that occurs, how we can improve the welfare of that individual nation place that I love. Those are all the things that I wanted to cover, and I think we covered fairly well. I hope it was of benefit to the listeners. Any last questions or last comments from anyone on our panel?
I want to acknowledge that in my career, I've gotten a lot of opportunities from other cinematographers, but I've also one of the people, excuse me, I've gotten a lot of opportunities from women cinematographers. And I think that's rare. And I realized that's rare when Sev said, I go on the set and people tell me that it's the first time they're working with a woman cinematographer. And that just told me that there is so much more work that we need to do and that we need to acknowledge, and that this struggle has been going on for a very long time. And I think that continuing to support diversity and inclusion is really important, especially as Steve keeps pointing out that this cross-pollination of different culture of difference is really, really important creatively and just for for our hearts.
Well said. Jenny?
Well, my experience is very unique because I'm Asian filmmaker working and living in Los Angeles. Shooting a film in Greece was, just it's a unique experience. And one thing I would say is I feel like all the sort of points that we've been discussing, I think it's happening in Greece. I saw a lot of energy and willingness and spirits there. I think it's all happening. That was my experience shooting in Greece, and I think there's I think it's things are really happening. I had came back with such great energy. I was energized and I was really enthusiastic about. I kept telling my crew, ask me back, I'll be there to make another one.
It's on the best place in the world to shoot, some of the best people, some of the best locations, and I hope people utilize it more while protecting the integrity of that community. I think we should be nearing wrapping up. I've got to go picket. I think I'm picketing Warner Brothers today. So if you drive by and want to help us, I'll be happy to give you a sign and a T-shirt. But otherwise, I shouldn't be advocating. I don't know where all of you land on the issues, but it goes to a lot of the things we touched on today, which how important labor unions are for protecting ordinary workers. You'll be surprised to learn that Netflix has more money than any individual writer, and virtually every production company you work with is going to have more money than any individual cinematographer or any IA members or all the IA members on that shoot. But collectively, we can exercise some considerable power on the protection of what should be inalienable rights, which is safe working practices, reasonable pay, and the ability to have a life while pursuing the art that we love. So that's my political statement. I send love to each and every one of you, and support you in your various creative endeavors, and I hope you have great success. I think someone greater than I probably wants to sum up, but that's our panel at my end finished.
I thank you, Stephen. I want to add what a fun and informative, inspirational panel. I am ready to go film in Greece right now and take all of you with me. Everybody can tell the audience how passionate you are and just how caring you are. And you touched on really important subjects and very important and sensitive matters that we often don't get to hear on the other side. I'd like to thank this extraordinary panel of professionals, and we hope that this panel marks the beginning of a longer collaboration among American and Greek cinematographers. This discussion has been recorded and will be posted on our website soon at www.lagff.org. Please sign up for our newsletter and social media by going to our website too. And thank you, and see you all again soon. Γεια σας.
Yes, thank you guys.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Γεια σας.
Yeah.